So I'll just start by saying, welcome everybody. I'm Shelley Truxas, and the EV ambassador for Energize Wayland. Okay, great. Thanks, Kat. You can move to the next slide. So we have a program tonight that we hope will be interactive with the goal of answering all your questions on EVs and hybrids. And I'll start out by telling you why EVs matter and give you the large global picture, and then move it down all the way to Wayland. We have a panel of Wayland EV hybrid owners who will tell you about their car and their experience with it. And I'll then turn to Anna Vanderspeck, who is the EV program director at Green Energy Consumers Alliance, who will tell you the benefits for drivers of EVs, address some of the concerns voiced by people when they consider EVs, and show you the great deals you can get on a variety of cars. Finally, we're going to end with the Q&A session where our Wayland EV owners and Anna will answer your questions. So please put your questions in the chat anytime during the presentation. So next slide, Kat. So why do electric vehicles matter? Well, most importantly, EVs do not emit greenhouse gases. And according to the EPA in 2019, the transportation sector accounted for the greatest amount of greenhouse gas emissions, which was 29%. But that was the average overall in the US, and it varies by regions. So if you look at Massachusetts, transportation accounts for 42% of greenhouse gases. So that's huge. The middle diagram compares the average emissions of a gasoline-only, a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, and a battery electric vehicle. So when you're moving from a gasoline-only to a plug-in hybrid, you cut your emissions by more than half, 381 to 176. If you then move to an electric battery vehicle, you again cut them in half. Now that the emissions with a regular battery EV are associated with the electricity production. But if you charge your EV with renewable energy like wind or solar, or participate in green power programs, your driving can be virtually emissions-free. Next slide. So another really important reason that EVs matter is that they don't emit particulate matter. And particulate matter from fossil fuel combustion impacts human health with increased mortality due to respiratory and cardiovascular disease. An international collaborative study found that fossil fuel pollution contributed to the deaths of more than 8 million people worldwide in 2018. And the regions with the highest concentration of fossil fuel related air pollution were Europe, Southeast Asia, and Eastern North America. That amazed me that they have us right there, Eastern North America. So it's really important to Massachusetts. If you look across the US communities of color, across the US, communities of color bore the brunt of the COVID-19 pandemic. Massachusetts ranked 4th nationally in the total number of cases and 3rd in total deaths from COVID-19. And the cities and towns hit hardest are those that are home to communities of color, which have long been among the poorest and most polluted in Massachusetts, with higher than average rates of asthma-related hospitalizations. So a Boston University School of Public Health analysis of data compiled by the Attorney General's office shows that communities with a greater populations of people of color have the highest rates of COVID-19 infection across 38 of the largest cities in Massachusetts. And that's what's shown in this graph, where the y-axis is the cases per 10,000 inhabitants, and the x-axis is time. And what you see in the graphs is each town is their information is graphed But what's important is that the color coding is by the percent of minority population, with the dark blue being less than 25%, the light blue being 25 to 50%, the orange being 50 to 75%, and the red being greater than 75%. And a key factor of COVID-19 vulnerability is environmental quality, specifically air quality. So there was a study done by the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health that released a nationwide study linking long-term exposure to fine particulate matter pollution to a higher COVID-19 death rate. So it is really important that we change that picture and take care of this pollution that we have from combustion engines. So the next slide, Kat. The good news is that EVs make financial sense. This graph shows the projected price parity for a 200-mile range EV and a Toyota Camry. So the EV is in blue, the Camry's in red, and you're looking at cost by year. And EVs started out high cost, but as the technology improved and the cost of goods decreased, we are now at a point where if you incorporate the savings from an EV that is associated with lower maintenance and fuel costs, we are at the crossover point where the EV becomes a better bargain than a gas combustion engine. So that's exciting. Next slide. So what is the current state of EVs? Well, if we look at it globally, Amsterdam is really right up front with their climate change actions. They will not allow gasoline and diesel cars after 2030. California was joined by Massachusetts and 10 additional states calling on the Biden administration to set the race to zero emission vehicles by 2035. They've also requested support and investment on charging infrastructure, which tends to be one of the barriers to EV adoption. So what about locally? Well, the graph here shows 4 towns. Concord is in the light green, Framingham is in orange, Newton is in gray, or whatever color you call this, olive, and Wayland is in dark green. And this shows the number of EVs by town per 10,000 population over time. And what you see is that, well, first I'll say this data was pulled from the More EV database. The More EV database is the Massachusetts Offers Rebates for Electric Vehicles database, where they kept count of the zip code for everyone who applied for a rebate from Massachusetts and the type of car. And they provided rebates of up to $2,500 for the purchase or lease of a battery electric vehicle and $1,500 for a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. And so you can see that the peak was in 2018 and Wayland was leading the way. So I think that's really a great place for Wayland to be in. What happened after that peak? Well, the drop after 2018 was due to both Tesla and General Motors, who makes the Chevy Bolt, having reached the 200,000 vehicles sold, leading to the expiration of the federal tax credit for these vehicles. The federal tax credit was clearly helping drive EV adoption. And President Biden has said that he would like to extend the number to 500K before the federal tax credit expires, but it's not in the bipartisan package, but stay tuned, he'd like to see that happen. So what we are asking all of you is to make a pledge to buy, lease, or test drive an EV. So now we're going to move to our—
Shelley, can I just, I'm going to put in one question that was a clarifying question from Donald saying, and I think Anna may answer this best, wasn't the purchase price capped at 50K for the rebates so the data would underreport? And I think the data may also underreport for Tesla because they've already hit their cap. Is that correct?
That's correct. It was 50,000. So even expensive models aren't counted. And if you didn't ask for a rebate, you weren't counted either. So I think there's a couple reasons. Anna, is there anything else to add there?
I would just make a distinction between the federal tax credit and the state rebate. The federal tax credit phasing out for Chevrolet. I'm not sure how much that actually impacted Chevy sales because Chevy responded by increasing discounts, but the price cap that the more EV folks implemented definitely impacted the numbers you see here. Because suddenly, basically when the Model 3 came out, the first wave was the pricey ones, and those were well over $50,000, and those did not get the rebate. So a ton of those were purchased in Massachusetts, and they're not in this data. And then the rebate also disappeared for 3 months at the end of 2019. So that's another reason why those numbers are lower than the number of EVs purchased in Massachusetts probably is.
Do we have, Anna, do we have any best guesses about what the real numbers are other than tracking rebates? I don't think we do.
It's the best we can do in Massachusetts. There is a national sort of database that shows you sales by state, but it is currently just updated through 2019. So the more EV is kind of the best proxy that we have.
Now we're going to move to our Wayland EV owners. If you can hit the next slide, Kat. We're going to have a panel, and they are going to answer 2 questions in 60 seconds or less. And the 2 questions are, why did you buy an EV or hybrid? And what do you love about it? And the first person up is Steve. Take it, Steve.
You're muted, Steve. Steve, you're muted.
Yep.
All right, we got to give him back his 9 seconds.
Okay, give me back 5. Sorry about that. So yes, thank you everybody for joining us. I have a Tesla Model S, it's a 2018 sedan. The main reason, obviously, that I bought it was that we are very strong believers in conserving, protecting, and improving our environment. We truly believe in a cleaner and greener environment is the way we need to head for our future generations. There are many other reasons, that EVs do drive better, they have less noise, but that environment was really the major reason. And why do I love my Tesla? I wouldn't have any other car, I wouldn't trade it in for a minute. The bottom line though, my #1 reason was performance. I love fast cars, I've always loved fast cars. It's 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. It has 670 mile horsepower. It has a huge range. Tesla is all about the battery, right? That's what they're known for. So on one charge, it's 390 miles. You can get from Boston to Manhattan on one charge. It's quite incredible. There's 25,000 superchargers across the country that are just incredible. They're everywhere. And we never, ever had to worry about charging. The second reason is safety. There's no engine. I've had 2 accidents in my Tesla. They are so safe. There's nothing to crush you. And then the third reason is no maintenance. It's like driving, I tell everybody, it's like driving around a laptop. The only thing you need to worry about is your tires and wheels and an inspection sticker. I just love my car. And there's also tons of storage with no engine in there. We got front and back storage. So that's my main reasons.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, Paul, you're up.
Oh, hi, everyone. I actually get 2 minutes because I got 2 EVs.
That's true.
Pressing the logistical arrangements here. I have to say that I originally owned a Prius, put 160,000 miles on it. Then we bought a Prius plug-in. We still own that. But the reason I bought a Chevy Bolt is that we've had a minivan for years while the kids were growing up, but the kids are gone now. And it's kind of decaying. And we really, really wanted a sort of station wagon-like car that could replace our minivan. And the Bolt was not it, but the Bolt came with a really, really good price tag. And I really wanted to drive an EV because I do chair the energy committee for the Massachusetts Sierra Club. So, I mean, I'm into this 100%. And the conclusion of this story is we still needed a replacement for our minivan. And so we found this used Kia Soul which is kind of like a small station wagon that's fully electric. And it only cost $13,000. And it was just, we could not pass that up. So we now have 2 EVs. Now, what I love about the Bolt is that it really replaces the Prius, 150%. People talk about acceleration. Well, you just don't have that very much with a Prius. But with a Bolt, it's not a Tesla, but boy, you step on the go pedal. You can't call it a gas pedal. You step on the go pedal and you go. And it's wonderful. It's quiet. The seats I find to be very comfortable. And we just love it. We bought that one first. And then when the Kia Soul came along, for our local around town traffic driving, the Soul is what we use now. We go in and out of Boston or go to Burlington or wherever the heck we need to go in the Soul. And we just charge it back up. It only has a range of about 100 miles. I'll be truthful about that. So it's not the car that we use for long distance trips, but we're now an EV family. So I don't know what else I can say. I'm happy to answer any questions later.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Thanks, Paul. Okay, Janu, you're up. Let's see, is Janu on?
Jano.
Janu, sorry.
He's not here.
All right, let's just skip then to Brian. Maybe.
Okay, then Brian. Brian, you're up.
All right. Hey guys, you see that's my little ride in the background.
Yeah.
We used to live in Wayland. We moved away. We came back. And when we moved back, we happened to buy a house that has a full solar array on the roof. So I'm commuting I'm virtually commuting now into Cambridge, but eventually I'll have to start driving back in there. And, I wanted something that I didn't have to stop at gas stations. I could just charge it up at home, at night and virtually use no electricity, off the grid to do so. So we shopped around, found the Audi e-tron, fell in love with it, drove it. It's quiet. It's like my little cocoon. It rides beautifully. It has great acceleration. And I'm a car guy too. I've owned a number of Mercedes, mostly high-powered V8s. And, I'm just shocked at the acceleration every time. What I love about it, I just love the comfort. I love not having to stop at a gas station or even consider that, and just being able to plug it up at home and either set a timer or just let it go. So I would recommend it. We're a one EV family because we do take longer trips, and we need the range on the e-tron is about 180 miles. And if you top it all the way up to 100%, you'll get like 220. But it's perfect for everything else. I mean, it's absolutely perfect.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, Ellen and John, who's
It's me. John
Yep.
is on another webinar. So we have Prius Prime. A bunch of people have talked about this. We got this as a car so we get about 30 miles on the EV charge. We drove it. So why did we get it? It was surely environmental reasons for us. So that's why we did it. This is what I love about it. For the first 4 months, we did not go to a gas. We did not have to put any gas in it. We realized that a bulk of our driving, and that was pre-COVID, a bulk of the driving in this car was really around town. But what we also love, it is a plug-in hybrid. So we have over 600 miles of range. So it is our long distance driving car. And then we are able, the other thing I love is we're able to charge overnight just in the outlet in our garage, or I'm up here in Vermont. We have some outlets out by our place in Vermont. We just charge up, and sort of the day-to-day stuff is all electric. It drives great, but I think it's really the range, super easy charging, and the environmental reasons. It still has combustion, so I still have maintenance on a combustion engine. Our next car will be fully electric. I'll pass to Kat.
Yeah, Kat, you're up.
Great. Let me add this pin because I'm also running tech on this call. Yes, the reason why we went electric, and we only have one car in our family, and that's the Nissan Leaf with 120 miles on it. So I can speak to the range anxiety. thing. But the reason why we went all electric with the car is we had already done so much in our house. We have solar PV, solar hot water, you name it, solar leaf blower, an electric leaf blower, electric lawnmower. Let's do the car as well. So when we had to replace our previous car, we went with the Leaf. We got a fantastic deal thanks to Green Energy Consumers Alliance. And we have only this car, and actually over the weekend we drove to New York City with it. It only has 120 miles, so and that was just fine. We just charged twice on the way over, twice on the way back. It took us 20 minutes to do so, and we just had a coffee and a stroll, and it was perfectly fine. We do have a level 2 charger that we have installed at our house, so that's how we charge ours.
Great, thanks, Kat. So now we're going to take a couple questions from the chat. Ellen, did you want
There
to?
weren't that many questions in chat. Lindy and Berna asked the range of the Bolt, and Anna has responded 259. I know we did see one question about anybody have all-wheel drive. Ours is not all-wheel drive on the Prius Prime. I do know, for example, the new plug-in hybrid Toyota RAVs are all-wheel drive. That car's coming out now, and there are some other all-wheel drives. But anybody else have all-wheel drive on their EVs or Anna? So
Yeah,
Yep.
mine is all-wheel drive.
So is mine. Yep.
So that's
Mine's
the
all-wheel
Tesla
drive.
and the Audi, right, Brian?
Audi, yeah.
Anna, what are the other ones that are all-wheel drive?
There are a couple. So actually, when we get to the bit where we show our website, I can show you that you can sort and filter by different characteristics to find the car that you're looking for. But the recently released Ford F-150 Lightning, if anybody needs a pickup truck that's got all-wheel drive, the Tesla Model X, Model Y, the VW ID4, Audi e-tron, Toyota RAV4 Prime, Jeep Wrangler 4xe, and the Subaru Crosstrek all have all-wheel drive.
Yep.
And
The Model 3 also has the option of all-wheel drive. Mine is rear wheel because it was one of the first ones that came out, but they do have the option for an all-wheel drive now too.
Most Teslas are all-wheel drive.
Okay, and a couple other questions. Debbie asks, is range affected by city versus highway on the electric? Anna, do you want to take that?
Sure. So yes, the great thing about EVs is that they are super efficient in city driving. So if you are stuck in traffic and you're just sitting there, you are not wasting any energy in your battery the way that you're wasting gasoline in your gas tank. However, if you're driving on the highway, you'll see that that requires more work of the vehicle. So your range will go down faster on a highway than it is if you're doing city driving. The great news is that all of these cars have really sophisticated battery management software. So it will tell you in real time at every moment how many miles of range you have left. And it takes into account how you're driving, the weather, the temperature, whether you're an aggressive driver and you speed up a lot and brake a lot and waste a lot of energy that way. So yes, there is an impact, but you'll see it in real time.
Okay, I'm going to do one more question here, which is, can you get, this is from Howard, who already owns a Bolt. Can you get a level 2 charger installed on the outside of the house? We don't have a garage. And what's the purchase price to install? So I know, I'm guessing Brian installed a level 2 charger, as did Kat. Do you remember what you guys paid? And Anna, did any of you put them on the outside?
Yeah, we paid, we got the very simplest charger. That was a couple of years ago. Cost $200, and we paid an electrician $100 to have it installed. That was the absolute cheapest version, and it's fine by us. And it is actually, it's in a carport, so it's not quite in the elements.
Brian or Steve install level 2?
Yeah, I installed it. Ours was a little bit more complex because I wanted the plug on the side of the charger because I didn't want to have to run wires. So I had to run it up through the garage ceiling and then down. So it was a little bit more expensive, but it was around $700 to run it. But that was mostly because of the running of the line, really.
So can I jump in for a minute? I have also put in a level 2 charger, but just within the last year. And EverSource has a rebate program where they give you $300 back on certain chargers that are Wi-Fi connectable. So the juice box is the one that I got. It's one of the approved ones. It costs $600, but I got a $300 check from Eversource because it now participates in a demand response program where Eversource can cut back my charging rate, not eliminate it, but cut it back during peak usage hour times. So if you want, so you get a really fancy charger for $300 basically, because you get the rebate.
All right, we have a bunch more questions and I will help manage them after we get to Anna. So keep throwing them in the chat and Shelley and I will take them and direct them. So keep them coming, but we'll let Anna may answer some of these in her presentation.
As has been said, my name is Anna, and I am the Electric Vehicle Program Director at Green Energy Consumers Alliance. For those of you who haven't heard of us, we are a nonprofit organization based in Boston and also Providence, working to harness the power of energy consumers to speed the transition to a low carbon future. What that means is basically we run a lot of programs for consumers to engage in and acquire or choose clean energy for their homes. I'm going to apologize for the beeping. I spilled coffee on my computer today and now it's making strange sounds all the time, but hopefully they will not be too much. Yeah, so we run programs for consumers and our Drive Green program is one of them. And then we take the experience that we gain there to inform the advocacy work we do at the state and local level. So I'm here to talk a little bit more about electric vehicles and we can jump right ahead. The first section, I'll talk about the benefits of electric vehicles for drivers. And then in the second section, I'll talk about just some basic things you should know, questions that people ask frequently. So Shelley already mentioned the environmental benefits of electric vehicles, so I won't go over those, but I will explain where those come from. The reason underlying why electric vehicles are so much cleaner than gas-powered cars is their efficiency. A gas-powered car wastes about 80% of the energy that you put into it. So 80% of every gallon of gasoline is burned away, mostly as friction and heat. But electric vehicles are much more efficient. They only lose about 20% of the energy that you put in. One way of looking at this is by comparing the miles per gallon and the miles per gallon electric of some popular cars. So the miles per gallon is a figure we're all familiar with. The miles per gallon electric is how far an electric car will go on the same amount of energy that's stored in a gallon of gasoline, which is 33.7 kilowatt hours. So if you're looking at this graph, you can see on the right up to 30 miles per gallon. The traditional hybrids that we're familiar with, like the Toyota Prius and the Hyundai Sonata hybrid, get somewhere between 40 and 50. And then anything that's got a plug blows everything else out of the water. So these are the environmental benefits, but they also underlie some benefits we'll talk about on the next slide, which are fuel costs. So it is, which we can hopefully see in the next slide. It is cheaper to drive a mile on electricity than it is to drive a mile on gasoline. And there's a couple different ways of looking at that, which we can do right here. So on the left, we at Green Energy Consumers do our own math every quarter. We look at average gas prices and the efficiency of average vehicles on the road. And we generally find that people save around 4 cents a mile by switching from a gas-powered car to an electric car, and that amounts to about $428 per year for the average Massachusetts driver. And this is true even though New England has relatively high electricity prices and our gas prices were, at least for a while, relatively low, and drivers still see savings. Another way to look at this is to go to the Department of Energy, which has a tool called the eGallon, where any day you can go on there and you can find out what the average gas price is in your area, and then the average eGallon, which is the DOE's calculation of how much you would have to pay in electricity to go the same distance that a gallon of gasoline would get you. So I took this screenshot a couple weeks ago when gas was $2.74 and the electric eGallon was $1.96. So that's another way of kind of wrapping your brain around these lower fuel costs. But one thing I want to underline in particular is that electricity prices are much more stable than gas prices. Gas prices vary historically a lot depending on global forces, but our electricity prices are regulated and tend to not move quite as much. So that is one sort of peace of mind element of driving electric as well. The next slide covers maintenance, which some of our, oops, actually, this is another slide about fuel costs, which comes from the Department of Energy and the EPA. It's a relatively new graph, so I forgot that we had it, but it's a nice visualization of what I just talked about, that the range of fuel costs for electric vehicles is much lower than the range of fuel costs for gas vehicles. So the bottom two bars are gasoline and diesel vehicles. You can see that the annual fuel costs are on the order of thousands of dollars. Hybrids are a little bit less. Plug-in hybrids are even a little bit less, but all electric vehicles are generally less than $1,000. This is a national average, but it is a nice illustration of this. The next slide, we'll talk about maintenance, I hope. As I was saying, maintenance, a couple of our EV drivers spoke about this already, but the maintenance costs for an electric car are much lower than for a gas-powered car, mostly because there are far fewer moving parts. There's just fewer things that can break or corrode or need replacement. I would point you to the Union of, Consumer Reports, which released a study at the end of 2020 where they had looked at thousands of real-life EV drivers and looked at their real-life fuel and maintenance costs, and they found that driving electric cuts maintenance and repair costs in half, which is awesome. That was one of the first really large-scale studies to prove this point that we've heard anecdotally from a lot of EV drivers. So if you want to learn more, you should go check out that website. I see some.
I think this is more of a question for Anna. Anybody know of a 7-seater electric car? I know their website allows people to search by that. And Shelley, there's the other website that's on our Energize Wayland site, Plug, what's it called? Plug, if you go to Energize Wayland under actions and electric cars, maybe Shelley can find it right now while I'm talking. There's another site where you can search by type of car. And Tom is saying the Tesla Model Y is a 7-seat option for all electric. There are, I think, some electric hybrid options for sure. There's a Mitsubishi one that's been around for a long time. Someone makes a comment and question, how does people's range go down when it's cold out? So maybe we'll just hear from someone who hasn't talked in one of the other owners. That Shelley, I don't know, do you notice on your own car? You're muted.
I can just jump in real quick.
Sure, Brian.
Go ahead.
I think it does, for me, it does drop if you run the heater or if you run the heated seats in the winter. I don't have a percentage, but yeah, I mean, it drops. Like when I charge normally, I'll see 180 miles on the range. During the winter time, I might see 165 on the range when it's cold.
Anybody else on the panel want to jump on that one?
I made
Chris.
a comment, but I find when I go to Western Mass in the summer, I can go to Amherst and back on one charge. I charge in my garage, and my Model 3 has about a 300-mile range. But I have to stop and charge to make the round trip in the winter. I mean, it's not a huge difference, and I find there are charging stations all over Massachusetts for Tesla anyway, and it's only going to get more and more for all cars.
Why are electricity prices higher in Massachusetts than in other states?
Oh, that's a really great question that might be beyond my expertise, but I think part of it is that we have a really old grid that needs some updating. And I know I can speak more to renewable energy prices in this area compared to others. I don't actually know the details of why our
Okay.
electricity prices are higher.
If anybody has a good answer on that, wants to put it in the chat, we'll take that and we'll go back to Anna.
The main point is that the Consumer Reports study is a great resource, and you can drill down into different vehicle classes and see how much you might save by switching to an EV. But one excellent benefit for drivers is that EVs are a ton of fun. And I say this as a person who does not actually really care about cars. I care a lot about climate change and people, but once you've driven one of these, it's really hard to go back to a gas-powered car. And I'm sure all of our EV panelists can attest to that. But I think we should go ahead to the next section and talk about some of the main questions that people have when they're considering going electric. And the first set is about charging. So a lot of people are afraid of running out of charge on a long road trip, and the term for this is called range anxiety. It's really a thing of the past because most of the vehicles that are actually on the market today have ranges that far surpass what most folks drive in a day. So if you, like most people, drive somewhere between 30, 40, 50 miles in a day, you can go with an all-electric vehicle that has over 200 miles of range and just charge up what you use in a day or in a couple days, either at home or at work, if you have those options. Or you can go for a plug-in hybrid, which is a vehicle like the Toyota Prius Prime that has an electric battery that you can drive on, but then also has a backup gas tank. So there's really more options for more people out there than I think most people realize. If we go to the next slide, we can look at some of the details of how charging works. So there are 3 basic levels of charging. The first is called level 1. It's 110 volts, and it's basically when you take the cord that comes with the car and you plug it into the same kind of outlet you would plug your cell phone or your laptop into. This is called a trickle charge because it's the slowest type of charging. It adds about 4 miles of range per hour spent charging. But it's actually enough for a lot of folks. So if you drive 40 miles a day and you're able to plug in at home 10 hours overnight, you can recharge what you've lost in a day, even though this is the slowest type of charging. The next level up is called level 2, and that's what a couple of the EV ambassadors here have talked about, installing a station at home. When we're talking about that, we're talking about a level 2 charging station. It runs on 220 volts, so the same type of outlet you would need for an all-electric dryer, for example, and it adds somewhere between 11 and 25 miles of range per hour spent charging, depending on your car model. The third type of charging is called DC fast charging, and this is the super high power charging that you increasingly see along highways. So, for example, the Chevy Bolt can add around 90 miles of charge in 30 minutes of charging. And this is really the type of charging that you would rely on when you're going on a road trip, not so much your day-to-day driving. In terms of plug types, there's really only one for level 1 and level 2, the J1772, which you see in the top right-hand corner. Tesla has its own proprietary charging system, so if you have a Tesla vehicle, you've got your own charging ports and no other vehicles use those ports. But everybody else uses the same standard for level 1 and level 2. There were some questions in the chat earlier about how do you install charging at home. We've actually written a guide, which is useful to you both if you already have an EV and you need to install a charging station, or if you're thinking about getting an EV and are not sure whether you would be able to install a charging station at home. It walks you through some questions you need to ask yourself and then questions you might need to ask an electrician. So the link is in these slides, but you can also find it on our website. And later this summer, we'll be coming out with a sort of parallel guide for folks who live in condos or apartment buildings where installing charging is a little bit more complicated. But we hope this resource can help answer most of your questions when it comes to installing a charging station at home. And with that, we can go to the next slide, which is charging on the go. So a lot of people are worried about where public charging stations are and whether there are enough because they are generally not well signed out the way that gas stations are. The good news is there's a lot more public charging stations than most people realize, and one great resource to find out where they are is called PlugShare. There's a lot of different companies that run charging station networks. And you can find them all on this one crowdsourced platform neutral website. On my screen, the map is showing up very small, so I hope it's larger from where you sit. But if it isn't, you can just go to plugshare.com and basically type in any address anywhere, and it'll show you the nearby charging stations. So on the map, everything that is orange is a DC fast charging station, and everything that's green is a level 1 or level 2. And the great thing about this website as well is that you can drill down and see more and more charging stations, and you can click on individual ones and learn more about how much they cost, whether they're part of a network, where they're located in the parking lot. So I highly recommend PlugShare just to get a sense of what kind of public charging is out there. So moving on, I'll just finish by talking about the incentives that are available. So on the federal level, we've already mentioned there's a federal tax credit. It's up to $7,500, and I say up to for a couple of reasons. The first is that it depends on the battery size of the vehicle. So most of the all-electric vehicles get the full federal tax credit, but some of the plug-in hybrids, like the Toyota Prius Prime, have a smaller battery and therefore a smaller tax credit. And it also depends on your tax liability. So if you don't own $7,500 in federal taxes, the IRS will unfortunately not write you a check for the difference or let you carry over the balance from one year to the next. And then as also been mentioned, this federal tax credit has expired for Chevrolet and Tesla so far, but we have our fingers crossed that something happens on the federal level to open that back up. But it just remains to be seen what can get through Congress. On the state level, on the next slide, we have the More EV rebate, which has already been mentioned. This is a rebate that you get after you've purchased or leased the vehicle. So once you have acquired a vehicle, you can go to moreev.org, fill out a form online, and the state will send you a check in the mail. It's $2,500 for battery electric vehicles, provided that they are under $50,000. And for plug-in hybrids, it's $1,500. Again, provided they're under $50,000 and provided they have at least 25 miles of range. So that is an incentive you can stack right on top of the federal tax credit. And then the third layer of discounts is where Green Energy Consumers comes in, where we run a program called Drive Green, where we have a network of car dealers who offer fixed discounts on a monthly basis. So if you go to our website, there's a big friendly button that says Explore and Shop, where you can learn about different vehicle models that are actually available, and then click through the form. You can see local deals from local dealers and sign right up on the website to get in touch with a local dealer. And by signing up through the form on our website, you qualify for the listed discount. So we connect you right with the EV specialists at the dealership and hope that everything goes smoothly so you can get an EV faster than you would have otherwise. And with that, I think we can go to the last slide, which is mostly just a series of links for those of you who want to take a step. So you can either, if you're not in the market right now, but you want to sort of keep an eye on EVs, you can sign up to pledge that your next car will be electric. You can also join our community group on Facebook and ask real-life EV drivers all your EV questions, and they will more than happily respond to them. You can sign up for our newsletter and get quarterly information about new models that have come out and what's actually going on in Massachusetts. And then you can also join us at an upcoming coffee hour. We actually have 3 planned for the rest of the summer. And for those of you who actually own EVs, who are already on this call, we would love for you to join us and be one of our EV ambassadors, which just means we'll call on you when we have in-person events or coffee hours like this and ask you to join if you're interested, so you can talk to people who are considering EVs.
I think, Shelley, it's okay if I lob 3 questions out to
Yep,
people?
go right
Yep.
ahead.
So one is, can you install the DC fast charger at home?
If this is a question for me, the answer is no. The DC fast charger is direct current. It's super high powered. It bypasses the charger that's actually built into the vehicle. And these are very, very, very expensive, and ones that really like rest stops and restaurants and places like that are installing. It's not something you can install at home.
One more, I think, for you, Anna, is does it use more electricity, use a level 2 versus a level 1 charger?
No, it's just the difference is just
Fine.
the speed at which it delivers the electricity.
Okay. Those were, what happens to the electric batteries when they're worn out, and how fast do they wear out?
So the batteries are generally warranted for 8 years or 100,000 miles, whichever comes first. You might have seen some splashy headlines recently that Tesla thinks it's made a 1,000,000-mile battery. Generally, the batteries are really well developed and very sophisticated and will last as long as the vehicle does. What happens to them after that? There are a couple of options that are industries that are building up around these options. One is second use, and this is actually already happening, where batteries that are no longer strong enough to work in a vehicle are being used as stationary storage, either to balance out demand and supply on the grid or act as backup storage. So there are whole supply chains that are getting built up around that. And then the second option, of course, is recycling to recover the metals that are in those batteries. Those are both things that are going to need strong policies to support them and send them in the right direction, but there's really some promising developments on those fronts already.
Here was the question I couldn't summarize. Does one still get green street cred with a Wrangler 4xe with 20-mile range, or the Pacifica with slightly more range? Is it supporting the movement when you get such limited range? I say yes, because a lot of the times you're just driving around day to day. That's all the miles you're really driving. So every mile in electric is better. I love the term than an ICE, a mile driven on ICE, which is an internal combustion engine. So
I will say that in the early days of our program, we had an event in Providence where one of our members had the Chevy Volt, which at the time I think only got 38 miles per charge. Now, well, the latest version got 53 or something like that. And they very proudly printed out a chart from the app that comes along with the Chevy Volt that shows how many of the miles they did on electricity versus gas. And they did over 80% of their miles on electricity, even with just a 35-mile range Volt. So it depends on how you drive it and depends on what you're looking for and what you need. But in general, anything with a plug is better than something without a plug.
I think I'm going to put one of the last questions in here. Anna, can you talk about the Ford 150 and the battery as backup for your house?
Yeah. So the Ford 150 Lightning is the new all-electric truck from Ford. It made a massive splash and is really exciting, but we're going to see how it all turns out. One of the big selling points that they put in all of their marketing was that because it has such a massive battery, because the truck is so big, it stores a lot of energy. And in the event of a power outage, it can reverse the flow of power and you can plug it into your home and it can charge your home. We are actually also trying to learn more about that because it sounds really great, but exactly how that works and whether it'll work in all electric grid territories is something we still want to learn about. But one thing that is clear in everything that we learned about it is that even though Ford is making a really public splash with this car, they're really targeting fleets with this vehicle because it has all sorts of capabilities that are really useful for like municipal fleets or business fleets. It has a lot of plugs in the bed that you can charge different tools on and things like that. So I think their first target is really those fleet vehicles. So those will probably be the first to try out that bi-directional charging as well. But we definitely want to learn more about that. And that, I mean, we think that's the future and this is game changing. And so it'll be really exciting to see it roll out.
Great. I think one last question and then we want to end with a little summary on Energized Wayland, which is a question on what kind of chargers are installed in apartment buildings. I think that's an Anna question too.
Generally, they're level 2 stations, and often what they are networked. So you've basically got two options in an apartment building. You can either, if everybody has a fixed parking spot, or if the building manager doesn't care who pays for the electricity, you can install quote unquote dumb chargers, which are basically just safety technology to make sure that the electricity doesn't hurt the car coming in. But most apartment buildings that we've talked to have installed what are called smart chargers, which basically you get a little key fob or a code, or the machine recognizes you via your cell phone. So you can plug in and charge, and it'll keep track of exactly how much electricity you use, and you can pay for that via a credit card so that you pay for what you use and then your neighbor pays for what they use, and it's just a shared spot. But this is one place that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, because there's lots of different types of apartment buildings and where the parking is and how many spots there are. So there's lots of different configurations that have worked for people. But again, we'll have a special series on that later this summer.
If you're in Wayland and you've not yet joined the Energize Wayland community by creating a profile, we really want you to do that so that we can count you towards our impact. Our goal is 1,000 households that of our a little over 4,000 households in towns that have taken climate actions. And we want to drive that number up. So we know many of you have taken actions, but have maybe not yet created a profile on our site so we can see what's going on. When you go to the site, if you're not yet logged in, this will say log in here. You click this green button. It'll send a link to your email. Check your spam folder. You'll then go through the process you're very familiar with to just set up an email and password. Once you've done that, you are a user on us website, and you'll continue to get our newsletter. And then you can go to the actions here page, and you'll see all of the actions that you can take. And today we're talking about buying or leasing an electric car. You can see I've actually done that. You can see everything I've done and the amount of carbon I've saved per year and what's on my to-do list. And for each action, you simply click on it. You can see the steps to take. You'll see here, if you live in Wayland and you have a lot of questions, you can talk to our wonderful EV coach, Shelley, who you've already met. Go to the Drive Green site that Anna described, and from there, see all the models that you might be interested in exploring, explore and shop, and you can sort by the kind of car you're interested in. Plugstar is another website that allows you to browse cars. And then if you are new to the site, you'll say you've done it or you want to put it on your to-do list. And I encourage you to, if you're thinking about an EV and you haven't done it and you want to put it on your to-do list, please do that. We're monitoring those, and we see new information or deals or updates around EVs. We're going to work on sending more directed emails to people who have that on their to-do list. So good incentive to do that. And there are all the actions here that you might be interested in. We talked about community solar. Someone asked, how do you like it? Here's another action. Again, we have a steps to take that'll take you to our partner Energy Sage website on community solar specific to Wayland, and you'll put in your account number, your average electric use, and they'll tell you what your community solar options are and direct you to several options that can give you community solar. So for the page, this is the most important. You can sort by the level of impact or cost, or if you're a renter, owner, or condo owner, and that will allow you to, or student, filter these actions. That's mostly what I wanted to show you. And this helps us really understand our impact. You can see in Wayland, most people have done a home energy, followed next by solar, a lot of activism, which we're thrilled about. And we hope that this transportation number will be much higher soon as more and more of us buy electric cars, lease electric cars, or choose to telecommute and drive less in general. So that's really a brief tour on our site. Again, we're a grassroots group, and then we're supported by Mass Energize, which is now working in 14 communities, including the Jewish Climate Action Network. I know we have several of our congregants from Bethel on the site who are part of it. So again, it's a really important time for us to be visible and vocal in our actions on climate change. So please be counted. It helps us understand what people are doing and what you need, and submit testimonials on the site. So, you know, this is the change we all need. The emissions from transportation are quite significant. And hopefully with this new federal administration, we'll see a lot more investment in the infrastructure side on EVs. So super exciting time. And I know all of our testimonial folks from Wayland would be happy to talk more about their cars. As you can see, it's a very enthusiastic bunch. So we'll send a follow-up. And if you want to talk to anybody individually, just let us know. And I think everyone, we can put people in touch with them individually. Shelley, any parting words?
Nope. just great. And I'm glad so many people were able to join. And I really want to just thank everyone who participated. It was a great piece. So drive electric.